I first noticed it when I started adding "it's not important" to the end of my sentences. Not because things weren't important. Because saying they were felt dangerous. If I needed something small, time, attention, reassurance, the words came out already apologizing. Can I ask you something? It's not important. I just wanted to say something, but it's silly. It doesn't really matter. He never told me my needs were a problem. He only smiled gently and said, "You don't have to make everything so serious." So I learned not to. At first, I told myself I was being easy to love. Low maintenance. Understanding. Flexible. If he forgot something, I said it was fine. If he canceled plans, I said I preferred staying home anyway. If he was distant, I said I probably needed too much. Sometimes, when I wanted to say I missed him, I stopped halfway and changed it to, "Hope you're having a good day." Not because he had pushed me away. Because I didn't want to become someone who needed more than he could comfortably give. The first time I realized something was wrong was over a simple sentence. "I wish you were here." It slipped out before I could stop it. He looked at me, surprised, not annoyed, just thoughtful. "That's sweet," he said. "But you'll be okay, right?" The question was kind. But something inside me tightened. "Of course," I said quickly. "I didn't mean it like that." "Like what?" "Like I wanted something." Later that night, alone, the thought arrived so quietly I almost missed it. If I admit that I need him, he might realize I am more than he wants to handle. And for the first time, I felt afraid of something I had never questioned before. When did wanting connection start feeling like asking for too much? The first thing I learned to minimize was my voice. Not literally. Emotionally. If something hurt, I waited to see if it would pass before mentioning it. If I felt lonely, I told myself it was normal. If I missed him, I distracted myself until the feeling faded. When I finally did speak, I edited everything. "I was just a little tired. It's probably nothing. I don't know why it bothered me, honestly." He listened kindly. Sometimes he reassured me. Sometimes he nodded and changed the subject. And every time, I felt relief. Not because I had been heard. Because I hadn't asked for too much. Soon, I began rehearsing conversations that never happened. In my head, I practiced how to make my needs sound smaller. Not "I need you more lately." But "you've been busy, I get it." Not "I feel distant from you." But "it's probably just my mood." Not "I'm not okay." But "I'm fine, really." Sometimes, after rewriting a feeling 5 different ways, I decided not to say anything at all. And the strangest part was this. The more I silenced myself, the more proud I felt. Like restraint was proof of love. The moment I realized how dangerous this had become came one evening when I was genuinely struggling. Nothing dramatic. Just a heavy day. Too many thoughts. That quiet kind of sadness that wants to be shared. He asked, "Are you okay?" The truth rose immediately. And then stopped. Because I heard another sentence, clearer and louder. "Don't make this his problem." "I'm fine," I said automatically. He smiled, relieved. "Good." And as the moment passed, something inside me broke very softly. Because I understood something I had never admitted before. I wasn't afraid he wouldn't take care of my needs. I was afraid that if I showed them, He might decide. I was too much to keep. At first, he still asked, "Are you sure you're okay? You seem quiet today. Did something happen?" And every time, I gave him the same answer. "I'm fine. Just tired. It's nothing, really." I said it so easily that eventually, he stopped questioning it. Not because he didn't care. Because I sounded convincing. When I laughed, he believed I was happy. When I smiled, he believed I was content. When I said nothing, he believed there was nothing to hear. And slowly, without either of us noticing, a new rule formed between us. If I didn't say I needed something, then I didn't need anything. After that, the space between us changed. Not colder. Quieter. He stopped checking in the way he used to. Stopped asking follow-up questions. Stopped noticing the moments when I almost spoke. When he was tired, he rested. When he was stressed, he talked. When he needed comfort, he reached for me. And I was always there. But when I needed something, I stayed silent. Not because he wouldn't listen. Because I had trained both of us to believe that I rarely needed anything at all. The moment I realized what I had done came over something painfully small. I had had a bad day. Not overwhelming, just lonely. He came home, kissed my forehead, and said, "Everything okay?" "Yes," I replied. He smiled and said, "Good. I'm exhausted." And immediately began talking about his day. I listened. I nodded. I asked questions. And somewhere in the middle of his story, a quiet thought appeared that made my chest ache. He doesn't know I needed him tonight. Not because he ignored me. Because I had erased every sign that there had ever been anything to notice. And the truth finally settled, slow and heavy. I hadn't been protecting him from my needs. I had been teaching him that I didn't have any. The first time I tried to say it, the words felt wrong in my mouth. Like a language I hadn't spoken in years. We were sitting together, quiet, both on our phones. Nothing was wrong. And that made it harder. I began, then stopped. He looked up. "What?" I laughed nervously. "Never mind, it's stupid." He smiled, relieved. "Okay." And just like that, the moment disappeared. Later, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and felt something ache inside me. Not because he hadn't listened. Because I hadn't even let myself try. The next attempt came a few days later. I waited until I was sure I sounded calm. Reasonable. Easy. "I've been feeling a little distant lately," I said carefully. "It's probably nothing." He paused. Just long enough for panic to rise in my chest. "Oh," he said slowly. I didn't notice. The sentence was simple. But it hit harder than any rejection could have. Of course he hadn't noticed. I had worked so carefully to make sure there was nothing to see. "I'm sure it's just me," I added quickly. "You don't have to worry." He nodded, grateful. And suddenly, the space between us felt louder than any argument. The moment that finally broke something open came when I was having a genuinely hard day. I didn't hide it perfectly. My voice was quieter. My answers shorter. He noticed. "Are you okay?" he asked. For the first time in a very long while, I didn't say I was fine. I could really use a hug, I said softly. The words hung between us. Not heavy. Just unfamiliar. He hesitated. Not because he didn't want to. Because he hadn't expected to be needed. Oh, yeah, of course, he said, standing up a second later than usual and wrapping his arms around me. The hug was warm. Kind. But as I rested my head against his chest, a painful realization settled in. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that I had made my needs so rare that when they finally appeared, they surprised both of us. The understanding came quietly, the way most painful truths do. Not in an argument. Not in a breakup. Not in a dramatic moment. Just a small afternoon when I was sitting alone, thinking about all the things I hadn't said in the last few months. The nights I'd felt lonely and stayed silent. The mornings I'd needed reassurance and pretended I didn't. The moments I'd swallowed whole parts of myself. Because they felt inconvenient. And suddenly, I saw the pattern so clearly it almost took my breath away. I hadn't been trying not to be too much. I had been trying not to exist. In any way. That might require care. That night, I tried something different. Not dramatic. Just honest. When he asked how I was, I didn't say fine. I said, actually, I've been feeling a little lonely lately. The room went very still. Not tense. Just surprised. He looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "Why didn't you tell me?" The question hurt more than anything else. Because I finally knew the answer. I didn't want to be too much, I whispered. His expression changed. Not annoyed. Not defensive. Something softer. You're not too much, he said immediately. And for the first time, the sentence didn't comfort me. It terrified me. Because I realized how long I had lived. Without believing it. I don't tell this story because he failed me. He didn't. He never told me to be smaller. Never asked me to disappear. Never said my needs were a burden. He had only loved the version of me that I kept presenting. The quiet truth I live with now is this. Being not too much doesn't make you easier to love. It makes you easier to overlook. And once you shrink yourself long enough, people don't stop caring. They just stop seeing. What you've taught them isn't there. Because the most painful part of this story wasn't that someone didn't meet my needs. It was that I convinced myself having needs at all was the problem.